Today we continue. We're looking at chapter 42. Ezekiel 40, 41, and 42 are about the temple. I should have put 42 with 41 and 40, but I didn't want the video to go too long because I was doing some preliminary stuff, reminding you to look at this picture. This is a drawing of an artist's rendition of what the Ezekiel temple might look like. You have north at the top, south at the bottom, east and west as you see where they are. You have the gates, as you can see. You have the temple, which is in the back. You have these areas of this is where the priest will change clothes and stuff. They have to have cleanliness. They have to be clean. They have to change clothes and stuff. These are also kind of like the things on the side here are not really dormitories so much as that's where they do eat, where they eat the food that's sacrificed to God, and they eat their portions. And so this is where the priests come and go, but they have to make sure they're clean. So you have one place here where they enter. And then another place, of course, is the east and west as they enter and go through. And they have little areas here, and then they have cleansing areas here. Then they participate and move back. So it's very interesting to see. It's different than the other temples, and it looks nothing like the other two temples that were made. Go back to, I tried, like I said, to put a video, which was not mine, on whether it stands the test of time and stays there, but it was a nice video that gives you an idea of going through. In 42, we talk a little more about the chambers. And he brought me forth to the other court, the way towards the north, and he brought me into the chamber that was over towards the separate place and was over the building towards the north. They're going to talk about these little chambers. You can see them better on this side. Let me get my bearings here. Right here, those little chambers on the side. There was also some on the other side that you can't see. They're 3 stories tall. You can see them more right there. And that's where they will go in to eat the holy food that's provided. They have a spiral staircase for going up, so they're not climbing and they're not walking straight upstairs. So that's actually pretty safe. You know, you go up this spiral staircase. And so they go up there, and you've got a reiteration of that. We're moving from the construction and the dimensions to the purpose. We're going to go into this, and it talks about the chambers there and gives you all the links and stuff. You need to read that. I'm not going to go into all of that. The length was 100 cubits to the north, and he talks about the 20 cubits on the inner court. And there were upper chambers that were shorter, and the galleries that were higher than those, talking about how they had these steps and they had the circular staircase. And it's a description of the north side looking exactly like the south side. Once again, if you are an architect, you don't just say, do it like the other side. I mean, if you look at a diagram, if you look at somebody who's a creator, you've got both sides, and it might look identical, but you'll have the same documentation, you know, on the 2 sides of a building, even though they're identical. And so he goes through this talking about the chambers. And the way before them was like the appearance of chambers that were to the north, they were as long as they are broad, and all their goings forth are according to their fashions. The north chambers and the south chambers are for the separate places. They were holy chambers where the priest that approach the Lord shall eat the most holy things, where they lay the most holy things and the meat offerings and the sin offerings and the trespass offerings, for the place is holy. So when the priests participate, this is where they're going. And so that's how that happens. And he does this, and the priests enter in, and when the priests enter in, then shall they not go out to the holy place unto the utter court, but they shall lay their garments whereon that they minister, for they are holy, and they shall put on other garments, and shall approach those things that are with the people. So the idea is you go up there and you eat the holy stuff, the holy food that's provided, and then you come down and you change clothes, and then go out to minister to the people. You don't want to take, you know, the uncleanliness of the people into the holiness of God. So you're kind of a go-between. You go and do your stuff in the middle with God. You take your food over here and you eat it. And then if you're going to exit, you change your clothes and then you exit. And then when you come in, you cleanse yourself. Then you go in to minister to God. It's a cleansing area. Almost like a detoxification chamber. And he talks about measuring the inner court and measuring the north courts, which was 500 meters. So they give a long space for you to go in. You know, as you saw that, it's a long space to go in across from court to court. And he measured the east side, the north sides, and they were all the same. It's almost like a giant square. God loves the square. He loves the rectangle. He loves that looks good to his eyes. If you look at this, the whole thing looks like a giant square, and it also goes up. So it's almost like it's not up as high as it is square. So it is like a giant, if you will, a rectangle laying on its side. Very beautiful. The eye, we've talked about golden mean before. And he measures the four sides, and they were 500 reeds. So everything got measured. And they would make sure there's a precision that, again, we Christians don't give the Jews. It's like, well, 3 days, 3 nights. You know, they didn't care. They did care. In fact, God trained them to care. This will be 500. This will be, when you're building the ark, it's going to be this side. It's going to be this side. This is what you're going to do. Here's how you're going to do the chambers. When you build the tabernacle, you're going to overlay it with this, and then overlay it with that. And then overlay it with this. You're going to make it this big by this big. And you're going to have all these posts and these hooks. And he goes through all of that in Leviticus. And yet when we get to the New Testament, who cares? God is more precise. So we see in chapter 43 that he says, afterwards he brought me to the gate, even the gate that looked towards the east. Now we're talking about the east gate. Remember, they could use the north and the south. The west was covered up. That was the back of the temple. But the east is a special gate. And Ezekiel says, and I saw the glory of the Lord from the way of the east, and his voice was like the voice of many waters, and the earth was shining with his glory. And according to the appearance of the vision that I saw, even according to the vision that I saw when I came to destroy the city, and the visions that were like the visions that I saw by the river Chebar, and I fell on my face. He takes him to the east, and he sees all this glory again, just like he saw in chapter 1. And he sees this coming at him again. He sees the same thing, and it's coming in the east. This is like God coming in from the east. This is like the prince, who will be Jesus. The king will come from the east. He will come in through this gate. And so right now this is coming at him, and he falls on his face. And the glory of the Lord was about, and the way of the gate was towards the east. And the Spirit took me up and brought me to the inner court. So the Spirit moves into the inner court now. And the glory of the Lord filled the house. And I heard him speaking unto me out of the house. And the man stood by me and said, Son of man, the place of my throne and the place of the soles of my feet, where I will dwell in the midst of the people of Israel forever. And my holy name shall the house of Israel no more defile, neither shall they nor the kings by the whoredom, nor by the carcasses of their kings in the high places. He's saying, this is where I'm going to put my feet. This is where I'm going to rule, and I will not allow these transgressions and abominations to go on. And so, and I will let them put away their whoredoms. Now, the interesting thing is, we have all these people, again, with elections saying, well, God chooses you to do this, and God chooses you to do that. Then why would he say, put away your whoredoms? He didn't choose for you to have those whoredoms, just to show what a great guy he is for forgiving you of your whoredoms. You know, sometimes they have God as a God who pushes you down, and he wants you to thank him for picking you up. Well, you pushed me down. You made me be a thief. You chose for me to be a rapist. You chose for me to be an adulterer. You chose for me to be a violent man. And now you're holding me accountable for things that you chose me to do. It doesn't make sense when he says this, and he holds them accountable. And let them put away their whoredoms and the carcasses of their kings far from me. Put it away far from me. You do this, and I will dwell in the midst of them forever. Thou son of man, show the house to the house of Israel, that they may be ashamed of their iniquities. See, they could have had this already. You need to be ashamed. This could have happened by now, you know. But you should be ashamed of your iniquities, because your iniquities have kept this all away. And if they be ashamed, now if is there. If is a conditional conjunctive. It connects two ideas on a if, not a when. If you do this, and it's a choice word. We don't like those choice words. It is a choice word. If they be ashamed that all they've done, show them the form of the house, and the fashion thereof, and the going outs thereof, and the coming ins thereof, and all the forms thereof. This book is to shame Israel, to show them the beauty of what their God has prepared for them, and they didn't want to respond. And this is the law of the house. Upon the top of the mountain, the whole limit thereof round about shall be holy. The whole mountain will be holy, not just this area. And he's going to set this out. From the bottom upon the ground, even to the lower side, shall be 2 cubits in the breadth thereof. He's talking about the altar now, because they're going to make this big square altar for the sacrifices. Now, I'm not going to go into the why is Messiah doing sacrifices, and blah, blah, blah. There's a lot of things that aren't told to us here. Why would Jesus come back and be the high priest doing sacrifices? I thought he was the last sacrifice and blah, Well, there's a lot of this that he's doing for Israel that has nothing to do with us as the church. And we have a hard time knowing where we fit in all of this. We're still a mystery, as Gentiles and Jews who have come into Christ. But yet we still have to let Christ live out his motif and the things he wants to do for his people Israel. So he's treating Israel differently than he does the church, but he's doing this because of his righteousness. It's hard for us to gather all of this in our heads. We have all this conclusionary Christianity that really gets in your head and just has everything lined up for you like ducks in a row. And then here comes Ezekiel and some of these prophets and knock all those ducks apart. He talks about this altar. And the altar will be a cubit and a hand's breadth from the bottom, and it shall be a cube, and it'll be a hand's breadth and the border thereof. He talks about the building of the altar here, and how it'll be, it talks about the different sides of the altar. The altar shall be 12 cubits long and 12 cubits square, as it's going to be a gigantic square. We've seen this before. We saw this with Moses. But yeah, it's this giant big square, and he talks about it thereof. Son of man, these are the ordinances for the altar on the day that you will make it, to offer burnt offerings and sprinkle the blood thereof. And you shall give to the priest, the Levites, and the seed of Zadok, which approach me to minister before me, saith the Lord. And he talks about bringing in the young bullocks and bringing in this. He is reestablishing the Levitical law for the Jews, so that he might dwell with the Jews, and that also the Jews might be, that his light and his goodness might go to the nations. Now this seems to happen for the Jews only. Remember, the Jews are going to worship God in a special way, but then they're going to bring that worship down to the heathen, to the pagans, to those. And people will want to be a part of this. Remember, you got to put all the scriptures together, not just these ones. God has specific things that he wants to do for his glory, and he's going to do them. And then he set out this boundary so that the priest would go back and forth. They will be clean, and they'll change their clothes, and they'll be among the men, be among the people, teaching the people. The people will want God. They can't approach him. There's going to be these priests. And this is how God's establishing it. And I'm not going to question why. I'm just going to say, cool. So here he is, and he talks about the bullocks, and he talks about the sin offerings. And he shall burn it as the appointed place. And on the second day, he shall offer a kid of goats without blemishing. It sounds very Levitical law here. He's reestablishing that with these people. When you've made an end of cleansing, you shall offer a young bullock without blemish and a ram. And you shall offer these before the Lord, and the priest shall cast salt upon them, and they shall offer him as a burnt offering. 7 days you'll prepare every day a goat for a sin offering, and you shall prepare a young bullock. 7 days you will purge the altar, purify it, and you will consecrate themselves. And when the days have expired, it shall be that when the 8th day and so forth, the priest shall make your burnt offerings upon the altar and peace offerings to it, and God will accept you. Now notice he doesn't have a trespass offering. You get the idea that now there's no need for a trespass offering. There's just a burnt offering of worship, of giving to God, and there is a peace offering. So it's again, he's taking care of this. By consecrating the priest, he's taking care of the trespass. So when the nations approach, there'll be these priests that can go in and be the segue to the laws and all of these things, the Elohim. And again, like I said, with our Christian, sit by Jesus side stuff, we have a hard time with how this is going to be. But you need to read Ezekiel for yourself. You need to make some decisions about what this says. Many times Ezekiel and these prophets are like putting together a giant puzzle, and and all the pieces, you're not sure exactly how the pieces. Sometimes you got to move pieces back. You have to be willing to take out some of your suppositions. And so here we have that. in 42 and 43. In 44 it says, and he brought me back to the gates outward of the sanctuary, and we looked towards the east, and he said, this gate shall be shut, and it shall not be opened, and no man shall enter it, because the Lord, the God of Israel, has entered it. Therefore it shall be shut. The eastern gate is shut because God has entered it. God only comes in his way. You can come in your own ways. The way of God is different than the way of man. He is sanctifying that. And it shall be for the prince. Who will be the prince? Jesus will be the prince. And he shall sit in it to eat bread before the Lord, and he shall enter it by the way of the porch of the same gate, and shall go out by the same. So, if I was a Trinitarian, and I do believe in Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, I would say that Yahweh is in the temple, but you also have Jesus, the prince, going in and out. So, you do have God with the people, Emmanuel with us, but you also have Jehovah in there, being worshipped by the Jews in a specific way for the glory of God. This is hard for our minds to see, that God is God as the prince, but God is God as the king. And that's what we're saying here. So he brought me the way of the north before the house, and I looked, and behold, the glory of the Lord filled the house of the Lord, and I fell on my face. And the Lord said to me, Son of man, mark well, and behold what your eyes see. And he goes giving the ordinances of how this is supposed to be for worship. So he gives the ordinances here. And say to the people, you shall say to the rebellious, even to the house of Israel, O house of Israel, let it suffice you of your abominations, in that you brought into my sanctuary strangers, uncircumcised in heart and uncircumcised in flesh, to be in my sanctuary, to pollute it, even my house. He's having to take his house and cleanse it. That's what this is about, the cleansing of the house. And that these priests will be cleansing it 7 days, and the eighth day they can officiate. And he's telling them why. And you haven't kept charge of my things. You haven't been keepers of my charge in the sanctuary. No, and I said, no stranger uncircumcised in heart, nor uncircumcised in flesh. Now notice that right now we have people turning against circumcision. They're saying that, well, my body, my choice, and you've got to ask children if they want to be circumcised. Well, they're wanting to keep people out of the temple here. They want to keep people from coming in, or you're going to have a circumcision later, which was a lot more painful and dangerous. He's saying that no stranger uncircumcised in heart or uncircumcised in flesh shall enter in, and the Levites that have gone astray, they can come back, but it says they will only be ministers outside the court. He gives the idea here when he's talking that there were Levites who stayed true to God, and those are the ones who will be in the inner courts and be able to sanctify and minister in that area. But Levites that had gone astray from me, when Israel went astray, and they went astray, they shall be ministers of my sanctuary, having charge at the gates of the house, ministering to the house. They shall slay the burnt offerings and the sacrifices of the people, because they ministered unto them before their idols. See, these people they weren't neutral. They ministered to their idols instead of ministering to God. And therefore now they're going to be in the outer part ministering to God. You don't get that privilege. I have lifted up my hand against them. But I will make the keepers of the charge of the house for all the services. But the priests and the Levites and the sons of Zadok that kept the charge of my sanctuary, when the Israelites were led astray, and they shall come near to me to minister unto me, and they shall stand before me to offer for me the fat and the blood. And they shall enter into my sanctuary, and they shall keep my table. And it talks about being in the inner course, and they shall wear linen bonnets, and they'll have linen breeches, and they will not gird themselves with anything that creates sweat. So they don't get to wear wool. You're not supposed to sweat. It is, it's uncleanliness before the Lord. It says also that neither shall they shave their heads, nor suffer their locks to grow long, but they're going to keep their hair at a reasonable length. Neither shall they drink wine when they enter the inner court. So you can drink wine if you're not, but you can't be in the inner court. And they shall teach the people the difference between holy and profane. So this is also what they're going to do. They'll be teaching. And they won't come across any dead person. And a lot of this is, again, the Levitical law. Again, one more time he's doing that. And it shall be unto them as an inheritance, and I am their inheritance. Remember, he said that of the Levites before. And he talks about the priest here in 44. So we're setting this up. We're setting the stage for this great time of the prince, the servant David, and he's going to come in, and this is how God is establishing to reconnect with sinful Israel. Is this Israel sinful right now? Yes. Is he wanting to reconnect? Yes. But we reconnect his way. And this is very beautiful when you see it, how he's reaching back to the Jews, but he's also reaching out to the whole world. And the prince will be there. That's the most important thing. The beauty is the prince will be there too. Thank you.